Hall of Fame legends. 2024 Honors Weekend celebrates the induction of this year's Medal of Courage winner. Jonathan Koch is I guess, a multifaceted movie mogul, CEO. I mean, Jonathan, what's, I guess, the best way to describe what you've done in your professional career up to this point?
I mean, I've done pretty much every job in the entertainment industry over the last, 30, whatever, 5 years. I started off as an agent and then became a manager and then a marketing company and then a website. And finally, when I ran Merv Griffin's company, was about 30 years old. And then right after that, I started my producing career.
What was the draw to get into this type of world?
I really wanted to try something different. And so I came to Los Angeles. I tried being an actor, which I was absolutely terrible. Now that I do this for a living and I know what good auditions are, I can't even imagine what was going on in those rooms after I left. The hysteria, the never let him in here again, like all of that. So I tried a little bit of that, and I had a little bit of success, but I think the only thing worse than failing is succeeding in a way in that world, because it's all a lot of waiting around, and you can't control your own destiny, and you really don't know what the criteria is. One of the things, we love about wrestling is it's objective, either win or don't, either be successful or don't. But in the entertainment industry, it's much more vague than that. So I tried to put myself in a position where I could have more control over the outcome of my life. And so I thought creating my own opportunities was better than reacting to other people's opportunities.
Kind of like wrestling in a way. If you're on the offense, you're creating your own opportunities versus being, sometimes being a counter wrestler does help. But ultimately, you've got to go out and get the takedown. And of course, we're going to tie this into wrestling. You wrestled in high school from State College, Pennsylvania, a little lion, as we were discussing before we got started. But you didn't go to Penn State. You got a little bit away from home. You went down Central PA to Shippensburg. But you did wrestle in high school. Talk about when you got into wrestling and how the sport, I guess, kind of found you.
Well, when you're from central Pennsylvania, they just throw you on the mat in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt when you're, 5 years old, and everybody's crying, or half of them are crying, and the other, and it's just wrestling was a hotbed. But in central Pennsylvania is a hotbed for wrestling, and it hasn't always been the way it is now, but it certainly. My father was a huge Penn State wrestling fan, so he took me to Rec Hall every meet. We never missed one. And in fact, when I was very young, they used to throw me on the mat before the matches, and I would wrestle with the Nittany Lion. And he would say, grab my arm and twist it, and then he'd do a flip, and I was sort of the entertainment, or he was, and I was the foil. And so I just, wrestling was just a part of my life as early as I can remember. And I always loved it. I loved the work, more than the competition. I loved the challenging yourself, working against really just your own expectations, and being part of a team, but having an individual sport. So that, we got into it really young.
So when you see Penn State wrestling in its heyday right now, little callbacks to your time growing up. So what's it been like to see Cale Sanderson and their success from afar?
Yeah, I'm blown away. I mean, I grew up in the Jerry Vallejo and Jerry White and Andy Motter. They used to come to my house. My mom would feed all of them. That's sort of the first people that I ever really learned wrestling from. Charlie Getty, who was my favorite, Penn State wrestler when I was a kid. And it was great. But if we had one John Fritz, in the finals, we were all gathered around listening to it on the radio or whatever, when we didn't go to nationals. Like, having one finalist was like such a big deal, and to see what I think is undisputed, the greatest dynasty alive in any sport anywhere, right now. I love it. I'm so proud of them. And it's incredible to be able to have your team be the one, since in my other I'm a Browns fan in football, so I've taken a beating my whole life. So
Yeah,
it's nice to
sorry about
have,
that. Sorry about that. Yeah.
and I want to say, that I think having a little bit, more competition, 100-point win is, it's the sign that something is great in state college, but the sport needs more competition. So I'm excited for, what's going to come, and we'll see what happens. But I don't see anything stopping Kale or, Penn State. I don't see anything stopping them. They're just, because they make great men, and it's not just about the result. In fact, I don't think it's about the result at all. I think it's about, what you do when nobody's looking, and being responsible to your teammates, and all the things I love about wrestling are manifested in the Penn State program now, and that's turned it into a juggernaut. So I love seeing it. I'm not going to lie. When I watch nationals, I'm just so filled with pride of, for who they are.
Yeah, I mean, how close do you keep up with the college scene? Obviously, your career in Hollywood is kind of, I learned firsthand that I was in a movie for one day. I shot one scene. It took all day, and then I know when I'm trying to track down actors like Matthew Modine, I've been trying to get Chris Pratt on the show forever for other things, and it's like, oh, I get it now. They're on set for months at a time, depending on the length of the project. So I'm as a producer, director, and whatnot, you're kind of isolated from the real world at times. So how much could you have kept up with wrestling over the last 30 some years?
I was just actually talking to my high school coach who I hadn't spoken to in 38 years or something. I talked to him because I'm flying him out to the Hall of Fame for this event, and I just wanted to tell him how much he meant to me, because I don't think they ever get to know that. And I was just telling him that there was a dark period in my capacity to follow wrestling that was probably, you know 15 to 20 years, where I could just follow it in a cursory way. It wasn't until I went to nationals again, I think, in Philadelphia, the year that Anthony Robles won. I went that, and ever since then, I've just, I watch everything. I have, 6 screens set up for conference championships. Like, I literally watch everything. I try to know every wrestler. And plus, I'm on the board of directors for the NWCA. So I stay in touch with wrestling as a fan, but also try to put myself in a position to be helpful in growing the sport as much as possible, and live in the service of Mike Moyer and whatever they need me to do. So you know, when I was in the throes of it, I did take time away, and I missed it, but I couldn't do all of it.
You talk about going to Shippensburg, get away from home, but wrestling in college was not something you were going to pursue. Although you did say you did see a little time on the mat, albeit in the non traditional sense.
Yeah, I showed up, nobody cared, which was great. But I went to a great high school, and so, Scott Piper, who was a state champion, and Robbie Cole, who's one of my closest friends, who's going to be presenting me, who's now the head coach at North Carolina. But so we had I had great wrestlers on my team. I just wasn't one of them. So I think the coaches thought, well, maybe you came from a good program, maybe it's worth a try to let me come up to the room and see what's going on. But, probably 5 minutes into it, they realized that I was really going to be, a tackling dummy, a wrestling dummy, every kind of dummy they needed me to be, just for the guys there that were actually going to compete on behalf of Shippensburg. But it was pretty short as far as my time goes, because I got rolled over, guys, the room was small, and some pretty huge guys came rolling through there. My foot was planted, and it tore everything in my knee. And I remember walking through the frozen parking lot in my shorts and my wrestling shoes, and sort of the lowest moment when you realize, wrestling's over, for me in this way anyway. So by the time I finished that walk, I thought to myself, this could be the best thing that ever happened to me also, because I had gotten everything that I possibly could from the standpoint of character and the standpoint of understanding what it took to, work through adversity and resilience. And I had already gotten all of that from wrestling, and I wasn't going to compete, anymore, not by my own choice. I just don't think I was good enough to do it. And by the time I reached the dorms, I was ready. I thought to myself, this was fortuitous. I probably would have hung on to that way too long. So my career came to an end, and so be it.
Some people talk about the car ride home after, after a loss, and it's the speech you get from your dad, or if your dad's the coach, or if it's the coach. Your car ride home was a walk back to the dorm,
Yeah,
and it was just one voice in your head.
it was, but it was so obvious. Like, I've always been this age, even when I was that age. And, my perspective of it, I love the quote that roughly is, I treat victories and defeat like the imposters they both are. And, that was always, you know, loud in my head. And I realized that, you know, that I had accomplished everything that I was capable of accomplishing, and that I worked as hard as any human being could to overcome mediocrity. And I had some great moments, and I was part of an amazing team in State College. We were undefeated my senior year, and it was just incredibly meaningful to be, a heavier weight fighting for the opportunity to stay undefeated at times when it would come down to my match. And I got so much out of it. And I just realized, like, from an attachment and a relationship with my teammates, it couldn't get any better than that. My love of that team and my appreciation for our coaches wasn't going to get any better than that. And so when I showed up at Shippensburg, probably trying to hang on to something that was over with before I got there, getting hurt was fortuitous in a way. It saved me from myself a little bit, because I always felt like the pain of quitting was worse than the pain. So, I hung on as long as I could.
When you get away from wrestling, you get into your career. Obviously you'd taken us through the, I guess, the Cliff Notes version of where you got to where you are today, but the Medal of Courage honor that you're being, recognized for by the National Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2024 was for something that was not sports related. It was something that you had to show that resilience that you learned through wrestling. And of course, if anybody is familiar with your story, and if they're not, 2020 did a great piece on you several years ago, and the Rocky theme comes through, and it's kind of fitting that it was NCAAs in Philadelphia that brought you back into the sport, given your affinity for Rocky, and using, as you said in that series, the gospel of Rocky, so to speak. But the Medal of Courage is bestowed upon somebody that's overcome seemingly insurmountable odds, and that's been a wrestler. And for the uninitiated, your insurmountable odds caused you to lose digits, lose a limb, and have a very unique, and at that time probably a experimental
Revolutionary.
surgery, yeah, with the hand transplant. So let's go back in time. You're on your way to a conference in 2015. You wake up, you don't feel good. You get on a cross country flight. You go to a conference. You're across the country from where you live in California to Washington D.C., and basically the wheels come falling off here. So kind of give us the short version of when all of these problems with your affliction came to light.
I was supposed to leave on Monday, and the conference that we were going to is called Real Screen, and it's speed dating for producers and networks, for buyers and sellers. So it's crucial. It's the Super Bowl of reality television every year. And we had just sold our company, and I felt a huge responsibility. So even though I felt terrible, I got on a plane anyway, probably against better judgment. And I was pitching Discovery Channel, and I saw three executives that I was pitching to, but there was only one there. So I pitched to the one in the middle, figuring that was her. And then as soon as it was over, I wandered out to the front of the hotel. I didn't tell anybody. And I got a cab and I said, take me to the nearest hospital. And within 2 hours, I was told that I was probably going to die that night, and that I should get in touch with my family. So things were getting bad very quickly. I mean, my body was just so swollen and, just all the signs of terrible of it being attacked, and nobody knew what was attacking it. So they were trying everything, but nothing was working. And I didn't have a lot of oxygen in my brain, so I was being pretty obstinate and trying to leave the hospital. And it was a pretty big fight. And so at a certain point, I think, I don't remember this, I was told this, from people around me, but at some point I tried to tear out all the, needles out of my arms and all my IVs and everything, and tried to leave, like stomp out of the hospital like Frankenstein, I guess. And my father-in-law grabbed me by my foot. He's like half my size. And he grabbed me by my foot and held on until the nurses came in and induced me into a coma. And it was terrifying. The coma was terrifying in itself. But as you said, for the sake of brevity, I woke up to, the idea that I was going to have to get these amputations. And that's what happened. And from there, it was a fight to stabilize, my health. It was a fight to get stronger to be able to survive the amputations, and it was a fight to come home.
You talk about all the fights, and that's an 18-month span, I believe, like a year and a half from the moment it happens to when ultimately you're starting to come around, you're starting to recover. And when we look at the things that are going through, okay, you're not yet married. It's your fiance, and then you've got a young daughter, a young teen daughter at the time. As we go back, I guess 9 years ago at this point, we're almost at a decade past it. The resilience of wrestling, which you talk about, it's like, you learn things here. It's not something that's like fresh in your mind. You're like, I got to do this because I'm a wrestler. It's not like a happy-go-lucky kind of sports, Karate Kid, Rocky type of story. It's this is legit. This is real. This is real world problems. This is not sports. So, where did you call on that strength from? I mean, you had the support system of your soon-to-be wife and your family, but where else did you draw that fight from to basically get through this incredible ordeal?
I remember the exact moment, when I was really being obstinate. And in my mind, the doctor who was treating me in Washington was like a cross between Godzilla and Broomhilda. She was like, I was really not having a good time of it. In my mind, she was like 6'5", 250, like pushing me around, and I remember I was saying terrible things to her, which, since she's told me what those things were, totally the opposite of my personality. I would never do that. But I asked her how she even became a doctor. Um, and according to her, I remember this like nurse outside my door rolling up her sleeves, like, nobody talks to Dr. Abel like that. Like, I thought she was going to kick my ass. So things were not going great. And I think she was trying to get my attention. So she said, you're probably going to die tonight, and you need to get in contact with your family, your daughter. And when she said that, my daughter in particular, because Jennifer and I, my wife, had been in contact, but my daughter didn't know anything that was going on. And when she said, you should get in contact with your daughter, it all kicked in. And I was like, there is no way that I'm calling my daughter to tell her that I'm probably going to die tonight, that I'm going to pull everything that I am and everything I've ever been, and all of the training I've had, all the love that I have for my family, and I'm just not going to die. I'm going to fight. And, so that was what was in my mind. And, when I got through all of it, when they finally induced it. And again, like for the brevity of this, like, the ordeal was huge. Like it was, months and months without eating. It was, having my hands and feet were dead, necrotic, they were black, they were mummified. And, they were doing everything they could. And just by good fortune, somebody came up with the idea of what was wrong with me, and they told my doctors, and they were able to give me chemotherapy and everything, and start bringing me around. At a certain point they had to stop treating me because they were killing me. And so, according to the doctor, they stopped and said, it's up to you, Jonathan, to me now in a coma, fighting off all these, you know, snake bite terror, coma terrors with snakes biting me all day, every day, and being held captive, and like all these horrifying things that were happening in my coma. And when I came out and I was stabilized, they eventually wanted to transfer me to Mayo Clinic. And we had made a lot of friends during that time. And so everybody sort of gathered to say goodbye, and they were bringing me scarves and, George Washington University Hospital tchotchkes and hats just to wish me best of luck on my way to Mayo. But Broomhilda wasn't there. And I was glad because I remember talking to her in a terrible way. And then all of a sudden, everybody got quiet, and all the doctors parted. And there, standing at the door, was this diminutive, very sweet looking blonde doctor who I immediately recognized was Dr. Abel, who I thought was Broomhilda. She was actually not that at all, of course. And she asked everybody to leave. And I was really concerned about what she was going to say to me because I didn't treat her well. And she closed the door behind me, and she turned around and walked towards me, and I could see tears rolling down her face. And of course, I didn't know she could cry or that she was, really even a human by my earlier recollections. And she came over and held my paw, and she said, I've never seen anything like you in my life. She said, you are the sickest person that will ever leave this hospital. There's no reason that you should have be leaving this hospital. And I just don't know how you did it. And I had a tracheotomy, so I couldn't really talk to her. And so I whispered to her the only thing that I thought I could get out that would make sense, which was, I'm a wrestler. I told her I'm a wrestler. And she hugged me, and we both cried, and, and she left, and they shipped me off to Mayo Clinic. So that's, in that moment, I think when I decided not to call my daughter and tell her that I was going to die, I think that's the moment that I tapped back into my wrestling life.
And the time frame too. You're away, so you live in California. You're in D.C. Then you get shipped up to Minnesota. So what was the timeline there? How long were you in D.C. at George Washington? How much time did you spend at Mayo?
I was 2 months, I think, in George Washington, and then another maybe 2 months, or maybe 2.5 months at George Washington, and a month and a half at Mayo. I left, I got sick in January. I went home in May,
And then we get to,
late
I guess
April. Yeah.
you repair your body's starting to heal. So what are the steps between that? Okay, if you watch the 2020, your hands in bandages. You've got basically the term gangrene's used a lot. You said necrotic, they're black. I mean you said paw, which is, if looking at the video with your hands in bandages, is essentially it's kind of what it looked like. So apt description there. When's the time frame between the time you're like, okay, I'm back in California, to when this doctor shows up with this idea, looking for that right patient to say, you know what, we're going to try something here, I'm not trying to make light or find any humor in this situation, but you've worked in Hollywood. You've seen scripts that are worse than your story here, and you've seen scripts that are better than your story. And then I'm thinking of this transplant. I'm thinking of that bad movie Body Parts back in the day, where it's like, oh, great, we got the serial killer's arm attached to it. I mean, pardon a reference there, but we haven't
Yeah,
seen
it's so
anything like
interesting.
this.
That's so interesting you said that. I mean, first of all, the idea of hand transplantation was brought up at Mayo Clinic, and they really, really wanted to do it at Mayo. My daughter's birthday, 16th birthday was coming up in May, and I said to Jennifer, like, we we have to go home. Like Jennifer literally, she's well known at all these hospitals as the greatest advocate a patient has ever had. She sparked up into some superhero, mode. And so she ordered a wheelchair off of Amazon. They had put me in an old folks home because it was terrifying. I mean, and I'm not scared of anything. It was terrifying. They said you're not sick enough to stay in the hospital, but you have to stay here to do hyperbaric chamber treatments, which I give credit to saving so much of what I have left because those hyperbaric chamber treatments were incredible and I could feel it, but they were also terrifying because they put a plastic hood over your head and a metal collar around your neck and put you 105 meters below sea level from a pressure standpoint. And for a lot of people, it was nothing. They were sitting around doing crossword puzzles, but I couldn't move and I was laying down. So I was suffocating a lot, like during the treatments, and they were, like way over an hour long, and it was really tough. And um, so I started to wear down. My After about 28 of those treatments, I had a panic attack in the hyperbaric chamber, which really sucks because they can't just take you out or you'll get the bends. So they have to bring you up slowly. So it was all terrible. And I had gotten to the point now where I was like, I don't think that I can keep doing that anymore without having the reaction that I had because I was just worn out from it. I was just worn thin from everything. So I said, let's escape. So I was very disappointed to tell Dr. Moran, who was the hand transplant at Mayo, who had never done a hand transplant, we can't stay. Jennifer said, I wrote down the name of a doctor. She put it in her pocket and she says, if he says this name, he's our guy. So long story short, we tell him, he says, I totally get it. My mentor and the greatest hand surgeon in the country is at UCLA, where you live. And his name is Dr. Cody Azari. Jennifer reached in her pocket. She opened the paper and it said Cody Azari. So we were like, he's our guy. So we made some phone calls. I got home on a Friday. We met Dr. Azari on Monday. And I was on 270 milligrams of morphine every day. I really didn't even know what was going on. I didn't know that, but I didn't really know what was going on. So we go and meet Dr. Azari, and we're like you, kind of making light of it. We're like, do you have a hand here that we pick from, or how does this work? And he looks at us like, this is not going to work out. You guys are too good. Um, So I was in a wheelchair, still had my hands and feet that were necrotic. I was bald from the chemotherapy. I mean, things were just not great. And he said, here's what you have to do before I can't do anything until you can walk. So, I had a 6'7", 280-pound trainer that we traded got rid of our PT people who just were not up to my level of expectations. And we got somebody that knew nothing about it. He knew nothing about anything. He was just a trainer at Beachbody that did like P90X and all of that. And he became family, but he took one look at me and he was like, what the F am I doing? Like, what is this? And I said, don't worry. Like, just push me as hard as I can handle it. Just push me. So we did some crazy things that I'm not supposed to admit. Um, and we worked really hard so that I could walk back into Dr. Azari's office. So I met this proselytist and whose family now too. And I said, Ryan, if I can't walk by the time my next appointment with Dr. Azari, like we've missed the boat. Like we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. So Ryan, my prosthetist, and Scott, my giant trainer, and me, we worked really hard. And soon, the first day I ever had my prosthetic, I walked on it, and it was blinding pain. I mean, it felt like razor blades were shoving up into my leg. But I was like, I'm going to show Dr. Azari what I'm made out of. And about, 4 weeks after that, I walked back, no crutches, no nothing. I walked back into Dr. Zari's office with a completely straight face, even though in my heart I was dying 1,000 deaths. And I looked at him and I said, now what? And it was sort of that moment, like in the Rocky movies where Adrian tells him to win. Like Dr. Azari was like, oh my God, like you're my guy. And we became brothers. And we went to work, at it day and night. And we became partners. And so he was my quarterback on my transplant team. He organized he actually did my hand amputations, which my hand was the first one in history of mankind to be amputated in order to be transplanted. So it was a real epiphany moment for him and a really, brand new moment for the world of transplant. So yeah, we got together and I kept working on getting stronger, and this is my transplant. This is the one I didn't get transplanted. That's my regular hand. So it works really great. And to your point earlier, Jason, which amazing that you said that. I went 2 years without a hand and and about a year in, I got a call from Dr. Zari and he said, I just want to tell you honestly that we had an option today to move forward with your transplant. And I said, no. And I said, why? And he said, well, the hand was perfect except for um, he was a murderer. And he said,
Again, go into the scripts. I mean, you see bad scripts, you see bad screenplays all the time. This would be one
yeah,
you're tossing out, right? It's
yeah.
like we've done that
And
movie.
the thing is, like, we were so bonded, Jennifer and myself and Dr. Azari and the UCLA team, like, we were so bonded that I never said anything but okay. I will follow Dr. Azari's lead, and if I never get a hand transplant because it's never right, okay, fine. Um, but he just said, I didn't feel it. Like I know you, and I know who you are as a person, and I know that you can't have this hand. It just wouldn't work. So I said, fine. And I went back to work, and I went back to the office, and I was trying to work, and I was a real mess. I can't even imagine what those people must have thought, when they came in and saw me sitting there with no hand and no hair and mostly dead, taking pitches, their pitches for their life dreams to come true. And I tried really hard, but my wife is the only one that can break through. Um, so yeah, so then eventually we got the call, and it was an urgent call, like get in the car and come to the hospital right now. Dr. Azari is going about an hour south. I lived an hour north to get the hand, to meet the family, and to meet me back in the hospital in about 2 hours. But unfortunately, movie script time, Barack Obama was in LA, so all the freeways were shut down. So we couldn't get anywhere near UCLA. So we're in the car, like this most momentous occasion, and dead stopped in the middle of the canyon, can't move. And I was calling UCLA, telling him, because time is of the essence when you have something like this, because the hand will start to die. So it was like a chance that we weren't even going to be able to do it because they wouldn't be able to keep it long enough, even though it was on ice. So we finally got there after like 2.5 hours in the car. We finally got to UCLA, and they grabbed me and they rushed me back into the pre-op, area, and got me ready to go. And there wasn't a lot of time to think about it. Um, Dr. Azari showed up and he was frazzled from the traffic as well. So I said to him, let's just be here together for a minute, like to get our minds right, like what you're about to embark on your Super Bowl, and and I want to be good for you. And so we sat for a minute together and got our heads straight. And he said, "Is there any question?" I said, "No." And he said, "There's a possibility that I won't be able to do it." And I said, "I understand. Whatever happens, happens, right?" So yeah, that was it. Then they took me to surgery, and 19 hours later, I woke up, and I asked Dr. Azari, if they did it. I just said, "Did you do it?" And he said, "Yeah, we did it." And it was great. And it was successful. And to his words, not mine, memory, I started singing the Rocky theme while they were wheeling me out. And I was holding my arm up in the air, straight up in the air. For what reason, I don't know. And they wheeled me through the hospital. And all I remember was that there were doctors and nurses asleep all over the place, in the operating room and in the waiting area, in the hallway on the way back. They had obviously been through a war, and they took me back, and I got to see Jennifer for the first time, and I could move my thumb on the first day. It was pretty miraculous. A lot of work to do in the between now and then, but or then and now, but it was pretty miraculous.
There's one scene, and it's just the whole Rocky theme going through that keeps coming into my mind, and it's where Rocky's going, "Ain't going down no more, ain't going down no more." This seems to be like it's a mantra. You were knocked down multiple times, not just from the onset. By the way, we didn't even mention what was the name of I mean, it's like 3 words that are like 30 characters long. So what was it? Was eight CH or HLH? What was the
HLH, hemophagocytic histiocytosis. It's like a kid's thing. Adults don't usually survive. It's like 1 in 20 million people get it. And, it was just, it was fortunate. It was unfortunate and fortunate because I had spent my whole life preparing for a fight that I never knew was coming. And I have to say, I always feel like we're all being chased by a bear of one kind or another, all the time. You never really know what the size of the bear is or how mad it's going to be. So, in my mind, resilience is not a moment, it's a muscle. And you work on it all the time and you practice it, even in the gym. You push yourself to the brink of whatever, and get to take a shower and get something to eat. But it's all in preparation for opportunities, but also for challenges. And the bear that was chasing me was very big and it was very mad, and I barely escaped. Like it was formidable, of a foe. So yeah, his HLH was the diagnosis of it. And so basically, what it was is that my immune system was encountered a virus. In this case, it was Epstein-Barr, and which is like mono, and
Mhm.
everybody has Epstein-Barr exposure. And instead of being able to fight it, it started fighting everything and it started killing all the good and the bad. And my own immune system was trying to kill me. So that's what it really came down to.
As you've come through all this, your life refreshed again. You're back to being active. Uh, One thing that the 2020 documentary or the piece mentioned that you're over 6 feet tall, you're over 200 pounds, you were fit, never drank, never smoked, never did drugs. You were kind of one of those active LA types. And getting back to that, what was that type of fight like to be able to do something? One, you're missing a leg. Two, you've got you know nubs on your one hand, and you've got a hand that's not actually yours to begin with. What about your other foot? That was one that didn't really get talked about in some of the features that have been done on you. I
No,
mean,
no
you said they were all
toes,
four necrotic, but so
no
what's
no
on the
toes.
No toes. Okay, so it's you know, like again, for lack of a better term here, like you've got a paw for that would be your right foot, right?
Left foot.
Left foot. Okay, so it is you know how getting back to being active. You said you moved your hand, you moved your thumb like right away, but the motor skills, the fine motor, the you know this type of thing, and learning to play guitar, all that type of stuff. What's the timeline for that? What is the you know the mental I guess frailty in some respects because it's like the used to coulds. I used to be able to do this. I'm I know I can do this. My body's just not letting me do this yet. How did you fight through those struggles to get back a degree of normalcy in day to day life?
I mean, it's obviously a great question, but I've always lived my life that way. It's not a California thing, just to dispel that rumor. I live that way. When you're a mediocre talent and, I wanted to always do the very best I could at whatever I could do. So I just, to compete, even to be able to compete, I just didn't want to do anything that would take anything away from me. So that was something that, had a lot of momentum and inertia in my life. So I think it falls more into the only the good die young department, than it does some sort of weird California lifestyle. I still very much consider myself a Pennsylvanian. I always have. And people ask me, where I'm from, and I say Pennsylvania. So I think because that's where the fight comes from, what I was trained to do in Pennsylvania carried me through all of this. And, um, you know, I never spent 1 second looking back. I just didn't. And that includes not asking the question, why did this happen, which I didn't ask, but also, looking and reflecting to your point about what I used to be able to do. I never really pursued my used tos. I just kept pushing my what can I do nows, and my question to myself has always been, what do I do now? And it was so much so, Jason, that at Mayo Clinic, they sent 7 psychiatrists to my room, including the guy we called the bow tie, who was like an old school, Freudian sort with patches on his elbow. And he came to meet with me in my room and he said, Jonathan, we don't really feel like what's happened to you. And I said, I don't think that's what you're really saying. I think you're saying that I'm not behaving in a way that makes you feel comfortable, that I am reacting like everybody else. And I'm not going to, I'm going to, all I can do is say, what do I do now? Try to get stronger, try to get better. The day I woke up from my coma, I asked them to tie resistance bands to my bed because I knew that my only chance to survive was to work at it, because that's always been my only chance to survive in everything I've ever done. So that's what I did. And I didn't know how far it would go. I didn't know how well I would do. And I really didn't think about it. I just, really stayed in the here and now of it all and worked at it. And, one day became the next. And it took me, a year to get back to the office. And I was working out with my giant trainer a lot, in between now and then. But I started skipping rope again. That video that you saw was probably 6 months after I got, maybe, I don't know, 8 months after I got hurt, after I got my prosthetic, that I started jumping rope again. And, at that point, we were taping the handles onto my hands so I could jump rope because I couldn't hold them. So everything just had its own timeline, its own progression. And, now I compete in pickleball as well as I would have competed if I didn't get hurt. So I think it was all a journey to get back. It's hard to encapsulate it all in this conversation because there were a lot of twists and turns and things that happened and setbacks and surgeries and all of that. But in my mind, to pull back on it and really look at it on a straight line, within 8 months, I was back, training at my fullest capacity to train. The hardest part was I would fall asleep a lot during my workouts. Scott would say, do this, and I would do it, and then I'd fall asleep, and he would wait patiently until I'd wake up, and then he'd say, do this. And that was the hardest part, was trying to overcome the exhaustion that my body was manifesting, because your body gives up way before your mind does. And my mind was ready to go, but my body was tired, and it hurt a lot. And it still does. I still fight it, but I love it, and I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't go back. If I people ask me, if you could, would you go back? And the honest answer is I wouldn't. This is an incredible way to be able to live your life, mostly because I've always just wanted to be helpful to people, and making television shows wasn't helping anybody. But my story, not me, but my story has helped people. And that feels great. If what happened to me, the only thing that happens to you is you survive, that's terrible. But if you survive and your story is helpful to other people being able to survive, that's the greatest thing ever. And I really mean that. Like I'm so fulfilled, with that opportunity to be of service. Um, I wouldn't have wished this on myself or anybody else, but now that it's here, I'm not going to waste it.
When you go back and look, hindsight is what you make of it in a lot of ways. But you go back to 2011, you talked about Anthony Robles already. He's a guy that was born without a leg, and his struggle in wrestling, his struggle in life is it's not similar, but it's also in a situation where he was born without a leg. You had one amputated, and you look at the similarities between wrestling and fighting. Fighting through wrestling and what he endured and what you've gone through and endured, and be like, man, it's really weird that the first nationals I went back to was the one where he won it.
Yeah. Well, it was, gosh, it was just so much respect, for the fact that I was very fortunate, Jason. I accomplished everything in my life before I got hurt, right? Like I had already sold my company, I'd already been successful in my career. I already had amazing relationships and an incredible kid and great friends. And before anything happened, I was 49 when it happened. Anthony, overcame the idea that he never was, like everybody else. And he went on the attack and said, I don't care about any of that. And it's very inspiring, it really is. And I'm, really proud to get the same award, that he has, even though I don't feel in any way, worthy of it the way I look at him or the other people who have, it's an incredible group of people. And I'm very grateful, for the award. But I look at Anthony and I go, like, that guy, that's a hero. Like, that's a hero thing to do, to not have that, able body from the time you were born. So you get used to it. It's all you've known, but you don't let it stop you from doing the things. And I have to say, in a way, I maybe his story affected me in a little bit of a way. Like I never let anything that happened to me stop me from doing anything that I want to do. I don't. I think I followed in his, footsteps that way. Um, and so I do really appreciate being able to see that. In addition to him, when one of the, like the third show I ever sold in my life was called The Gift, and it was about transplantation. And we took unfortunately, a girl who, was in a car accident, and we followed three of her organs to the recipients, and we told all three of the recipients' story, and then we brought them all back together with her mom, which was, incredible, emotional. And I really knew a lot about, the emotions behind transplantation because of that show. And, so there were many different sort of elements for all the things that might have happened to me that were challenging. There were a lot of great things that buoyed me. And I think watching Anthony at Nationals in Philadelphia, which by the way was the first time, even though I'm from Pennsylvania, it was the first time I had ever run the Rocky Steps. And, I was in tears because I thought I would go there and run the steps and whatever. And it was personal. And then I got there and there were so many people running the steps. And I was like, this is incredible. Like, it's amazing to me that this has become a place that people go to prove to themselves the difference between what they're able to do and what they're capable of doing. And they find that on those steps. And so did I, and it was just an amazing weekend, like, to be there in Philadelphia and to watch him win. And, yeah, it was really something. And, wrestling's meant a lot to me since then. I obviously, I pursued being involved with it in a way, but it all really gets back to when I spoke on behalf of the NWCA in Cleveland right before I think the greatest nationals ever contested when Penn State and Ohio State went at it in Cleveland, and Bo Nickel, Miles Martin, maybe to me anyway, the most meaningful match I've ever witnessed. Um, I think it was all very fortuitous, to be able to see that, to see it then, and be able to recall all the things I felt then when I got sick myself and needed to rise up and, you know, see the opportunity to overcome because of chosen suffering, right? Like something we're all taught when we're young, like we don't have to do, you know, 100 push-ups, we get to do 100 push-ups. That was the difference between why the people who um, came to my aid, the doctors and nurses and all these incredible people, that what they recognized in me that they don't see in other patients is the fact that I didn't look at this as a burden. I looked at it as an opportunity to climb. And that all came from wrestling as a whole, watching Anthony in Philadelphia, just all the resilience, like drinking from the hose of resilience that I got to do my whole life, came into play. And it's probably a big reason why I've come back to wrestling with such, ferocity.
Got to ask, NCAA's are in Philadelphia in 2025. It'll be the first time, wrestling's there since 2011. You going to run the Rocky Steps?
I could run the Rocky Steps on my hands. And if I can go and I'm able to be there, COVID really put a big, crimp, and I don't really want to talk about that much, but I'm highly immunosuppressed. So I haven't been anywhere, in 4 years. Going to the Hall of Fame, it'll be the first time I've been indoors with other people that I don't know since COVID. So, it's a big event, and I'm going to do that first, and then I'm going to see how it goes, um, because at first when COVID came out, they told me I couldn't survive because, I'm immunosuppressed at the highest level of any human being because your skin is the largest organ, right? It's one organ. And so because my transplant is skin, I'm very vulnerable. But I also am ready. I'm ready. Whatever comes, comes, And they've come a long way in being able to treat COVID. And I got COVID last September for the first time, and I made it. So I'm very confident that that I'll be able to whatever comes, comes. But I thought to myself, like, this is it. Like, there's no better place to break this whole, hold on my life than to go to the Hall of Fame and be around, our people, your people, my people. Like when I spoke in Cleveland, I got this sense right away that I didn't really need to tell all the things because everybody there was made of all the same stuff I've made I'm made of. And they would be able to do exactly the same that I would do if this, God forbid, happened to them. Like they would react the same way that I did. So it was really an opportunity to talk about the greater parts of it, not the parts that I sometimes have to share with other people
Mhm.
who don't really get the idea of chosen suffering, or, you know, what your capacity is like, or, all the things that you and I have learned about being around wrestling. So it's all very tied in to wrestling, and gosh, I can't wait to go. I'm so excited. And I'm bringing a lot of my high school teammates are coming, and, even my friends who don't know anything about wrestling, who just were there for me and watched me go through all of this, and lifelong friends, nobody under 25 years of friendship will be attending, and with me anyway. So I'm really excited to go, and, grateful for the opportunity. And even though I don't really feel award worthy, I will accept it on behalf of, an entire community, that wrestling is, that raised us to be tough, and raised us to be resilient, and raised us to overcome no matter what. So that's how I'll accept the award, on behalf of them.
Yeah, and we'll close with that. In terms of when people get these calls, distinguished members have a different feeling than the Order of Merit, than the Medal of Courage. Who were you notified by, and what was your initial response?
Um, well, I think the first thing was being nominated, which was Kyle Klingman from Flow Wrestling. Kyle, and I have had a lot of conversations. He saw me speak once, and then he and I have, periodically speak on Zoom, and it's really more of a personal,
Hmm.
thing between the two of us, and, just conversations about resilience, and, just I think Kyle's incredibly bright, and I think that he really wanted to know some of the things that maybe I could share with him that would increase his sort of understanding and knowledge about it. Because I think, Jason, like, people always ask me, in whatever terms they ask it, they always ask me, what do you know that I don't know? Which is based on the idea that I was, dead for a little while, and, that whatever you go out to like the very edges of your own mortality and come back, there's a story, there. And I think we started with that. We became, friends. And then unbeknownst to me, he submitted me for this, and Mike Moyer, and, that kind of thing. And then I got a call from the Hall of Fame, and, they said that I was being considered for it, and just wanted to make sure that I would be able to be there, which in that moment I know was sort of a nothing question for them. But for me, it was a mortal question, because agreeing to be there meant the possibility at that time anyway that I might, pay the price for it. And I said I would, because I felt like it was the right thing to do, or not for me. I just thought it was the right thing to do. So I said yes. And I had no idea whether I would actually get the award or not. But when they called and told me that, that they were going to move forward with it, Pat Smith, um, I was very honored. I'm sure you picked up a little bit. I don't really like being the center of attention. So a little bit of me was like, that's why I'm a producer, and why I'm not, in front of the camera, because I don't want to take any of that. I like the work, and I like the work that I did, with the people around me, because when I left George Washington, I'll wrap up with this, my Dr. Abel said, you changed the way I felt about being a doctor, about the way we all feel about being a doctor, and about what we're willing to ask from our patients. Because patients have a tendency to lay down and say, fix me, and my willingness, first of all, Jennifer had to convince them to save me, because there was no reason for them to try to save me, really, from a probability standpoint. And she said, he'll fight and you'll love him and he'll make you laugh. And, and if you save him, you'll be glad that you did. That's what the doctors told me that my wife said to them, girlfriend at the time, wife now. And, so when she said that, I changed the way in which she thought about how to ask the patients to be more involved in their own survival, that really meant something to me. And that's the word, right? Like, not to be passive in your own life when you're in the midst of whatever challenges, but to rise up, and the wrestling community is particularly well suited for that. And they had one response to it. But when I spoke to 5,000 rheumatologists, it was like, to an extent, a foreign language, or all these other groups that I spoke to. So to me, it was just like, that's the essence of this, which is I got better because I wanted to be good for the doctors. I wanted them to feel great about their job, not just me surviving. I don't know that I could have survived if I was so obsessed with myself, but I was obsessed with every person that came into that room that tried to make me better. And we all did it together. And it was like building a team, like a real live, living, breathing, felt like a wrestling team. Like we all had our jobs to do, but in total, we did something great together, you know, kind of like winning a meet together, even through just the efforts you made in your own match. And that's, what I did. And that's what I was involved with. And I still know all these doctors and I'm still involved with them and they're friends and family now to us. And, I think there's really something great about um, forgetting about yourself and really doing things on behalf of the people that you love or care about, or behalf of the people that are working on your behalf. And that's what I did. So that's how I will accept this award, on behalf of them, and on behalf of all the people in my life that encouraged me to stand up and fight, and all the people that I get to now encourage to stand up and fight. This is for them.
It's been an interesting story to dig into. More information if you're curious about Jonathan's story, Jonathan Koch. That's JONATHANKOCH.com. It's got the videos, it's got the features. Also got information if you're interested in hearing him speak. He's done TED Talks and things of that nature. So we'll find out if that's going to be more of an in-person thing. Of course, you say you do Zoom probably, I don't know how many hours a day, but just learning about your story even more than I already had known, and then being able to talk to you about this. One, congratulations. You might feel like you don't deserve it. I think that anybody that hears your story can check that box, be like, yeah, you definitely deserve this recognition. So I appreciate your time and congratulations on the Medal of Courage from the Hall of Fame.
I really appreciate your time, Jason, and I really enjoy, all the work that you do is really, as a professional producer, I just have to tell you, I think your work is incredibly great. It's very it's very well done and very thought out and incredibly impressive. So it was my honor to, be here with you, and hopefully I'll see you in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I'll see you there.
Okay, see you.